Welcome back. My name's Pat,
And I'm Shane.
and welcome to Pie the Corner. How you doing today, Shane?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Sunday afternoon in the park. We started with a pretty ugly, dreary day, and it's absolutely gorgeous outside now.
Yeah,
So kind of enjoying the sunshine.
yeah, it's beautiful. It's starting to get windy now. I know we're gonna have a little wind event this
Yeah,
afternoon.
I heard the leaves kind of crashing on my house, and I went outside. I guess a cold front's blowing through right now. I had no
Yep.
idea.
Yeah, it's gonna be nice and chipper tomorrow. So we'll see what happens.
Cool. How was your week?
Week's been good. Like just really watching a lot of the coverage. Well, watching and listening and reading a lot of the coverage about the Supreme Court stuff, but other than that, man, just doing a lot of stuff at work, interview type stuff. So yeah, staying
Mm-hmm.
busy, staying busy
Did,
during
did did
COVID.
you back to that Supreme Court thing? Did you have any doubt that they wouldn't take the case?
No, I mean, what I'd been doing over the last couple weeks because I was, well, maybe it even been a little bit longer, but I had been kind of like, man, like I just don't know, like what they're doing with this stuff. Like, does any of this stuff have any merit? So I actually went to the subreddit called Law and started reading their takes on it because they're obviously lawyers. So
Mm-hmm.
that really kind of calmed my anxiety down a lot because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these people were just reading through the full litigation, the full legal briefs that were presented and everything, and they were just tearing it apart. Like every one of them, they were just like, well, there's a ton of misspellings, this is wrong here, you can't do that, this is completely ridiculous, there's no evidence of this. And so a lot of the anxiety I had kind of slowly went away. And so when Ken Paxton did that lawsuit, which is, they were just like, this has got to be the most ridiculous lawsuit in the history of legal lawsuits. and
Yeah.
and so like I pretty much was pretty clear at that point that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, same. I followed it like you did, and I thought there was zero chance for them to take the case. I mean, taking the case, I just I don't think somebody who makes it to the Supreme Court is going to play around with the rule of law that way. These people, no matter what their politics are, they're serious about the Constitution and the rule of law, and above all, facts and evidence, man. So I'm pleased that they did the right thing. I don't know if you read that Thomas and Aito said they would have heard the case, even though it was a 77-2 vote not to hear the case. But those two chumps were willing to hear it, although they did say they wouldn't vote for it.
Yeah. And
And
that was actually, on first hearing of that, you think like, oh, great, like these two wanted to bring it in there. But apparently that is pretty on point for those two
yeah, yeah,
because they believe in hearing it if it's based on like a states' rights type thing.
yeah, yeah.
So that was the only
An
thing.
issue between states is
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. Or yeah, that. So, but yeah, I mean, I was the same, man. I will say this last month or so and watching all of this play out has really restored my faith in our legal um, check in our government. And in that, all of these Republican, many of them Bush appointees, many of them Trump appointees, were like, some of them were rejecting these things with, like what they would call with malice or whatever. They were like striking it down, but then they were like, this is ridiculous. You have no standing. You
Hmm.
have, and so, it does give me a little bit of a boost in my confidence in that part of our form of government. So, it is what it is, but we'll see how that plays out now. A little bit of succession talk and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. No, these guys are chump. They're keyboard warriors. That's all.
yeah,
Classic. I mean, classic keyboard warriors. I love that term. I kind of learned that recently. Okay, so I want to give a plug to the new. They're re-releasing all the Bob Marley albums right now, and one of the cool things they're doing, all the Island albums, and I think it's cool, is certain albums are being remixed by Bob Marley's children.
hmm.
And so I heard, and Stephen Marley's a great producer, and had a lot of success producing other people and producing himself and singing Bob Marley songs. He did a remix of the Kaya album, and so I've been listening to that all week. So if anybody wants to go listen to some Bob Marley and give a listen to Kaya with some fresh ears, that's a very worthwhile listen.
Technology, right? So
Right,
like
right, right.
he can make those changes to his dad's music. What, 40 years later,
Mm-hmm.
and here you go. It's like another take on it, but from his kid. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool that they can go in there and do that.
right.
So yeah, speaking of technology, sort of like our idea for the topic of today. Um, it's funny because the way that obviously just thinking about like him recording that music, it was all tape, all analog tape. And then it's all, now it's all digital mostly. And I think a lot of musicians still use analog, but it just, makes me think back to the 70s and how, things like that, because it was analog, because it was tape, it wasn't like you could just do whatever you wanted. You were really limited by the technology of the day, just like
Absolutely.
just like with everything. And how, when you and I were born, early 70s, for you, really early 70s, uh, it was like everything. There were black and white TVs still going on. So like, what are some of your earliest memories of technology in your world?
Well, like I told you earlier, one of the things, I'll get to that in just a minute. One of the things I told you earlier was we are the generation where the digital divide lies, which is I think it's a great time to be alive. So we kind of got to experience the old with the new. And so every year in those years, we'll just say like from the mid 70s to really to now, there were new products coming into our lives that nobody had ever seen or heard of before. They were like new inventions, and they were just kind of mind blowing. You had devices that would do things that never existed before. And they were getting smaller and smaller. So I'll touch on a couple things. We had black and white TV in the early 70s, and I remember when we finally went to color. That was a pretty big deal because it was almost like embarrassing, like we were so poor we still had a black and white TV. I don't
Mhm.
know if that's true or not, but you know how kids think, and if you compare households to your friends or whatever. Um, but a big one for me was we moved into a different household in 1977, and they already had a Betamax VCR.
Ooh, beta.
Yeah, yeah, that was when Beta was still king, you know.
Yeah, it was
And
it was
and
always
and and
considered better than that.
Sony was who owned Beta, and they had the license to Beta, so nobody else could use Beta but Sony products originally. And these were probably $2,000-$3,000 devices, and basically all you could record was like rabbit ears TV. It's like it's very niche device, but one of the things I remember is this man had videotapes of the Dallas Cowboys Super Bowls in like 77 and 78. So I got to rewatch, my favorite team, the Cowboys, on tape in the late 70s. And I would even like bring my friends over and pop the tape, and I probably would have gotten killed for doing this. And show off, how cool my house is with the VCR and with the fucking Dallas Cowboys. So that was kind of a big deal. And that might be the very first thing that was really kind of course changing, altering technology, soon followed by video games.
Yeah, that's a similar path. I do remember. I think one of honestly my earliest memories was being a little kid. Like I was probably two, and I know a lot of people think like, oh, nobody remembers that far back, but I do
Yeah, some
remember
people
this.
do.
I do remember specifically running around in our living room, and the lights were off, but the TV was on, and my mom was there, and it was all black and white. Like everything was bathed in that color of black and white. So I know that we were in that similar boat where, as a very little kid at least, we had a black and white TV. And then when my mom married my stepdad, and that was 77, similar to what your time frame.
Mm-hmm.
We had a big, a huge color TV. I mean, it was like a console wood frame TV that was color. And, as a kid, I guess I didn't really think of it as like, wow, that's weird. Because your life as a kid is in color anyway. So you think
Mm-hmm.
like, well, that's natural. So that wasn't necessarily like a big change. But, watching cartoons, kind of like, oh, it's all in color. Cool. But yeah, for me, it was the first real like technology different from something I'd ever seen was Pong. I mean, literally like the first
Mm-hmm.
video game ever. And then soon after that, Atari
Mm-hmm.
2600.
Mm-hmm.
And these were like, I mean, that was high tech shit.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean,
Oh yeah.
even Pong was just these two little paddles. And I was like, whoa, look at the ball. And then it gets faster. And oh my God. And then, and then Atari like takes that to the next level, which is still blocky,
Mm-hmm.
I guess just like pixelized kind of,
Mm-hmm.
look to it. And, so for me, that was like the real big first, like, whoa, things are changing. It's getting weird and getting different. And then, when the 80s come and then MTV starts, that Technicolor world starts to happen at an
Mm-hmm.
even faster pace, with music.
Right. Cable television.
Yep. Yep. Watching like Jaws. And I remember we got cable when it first came out, and it was still like 3 channels, but they were a little better quality. uh, I think it was like HBO and then maybe one other channel, maybe like TNT or one of those
Mm-hmm.
early
Mm-hmm.
ones. And we could watch movies and stuff and like, oh, that was crazy. And then like you said, it wasn't beta, we had the VCR, the JVC, of course, early
Mm-hmm.
80s.
Mm-hmm.
And just amazing, like you said, like you can record your shows, and I would record cartoons and then I could stop them and I could draw the picture that I was seeing on the screen. So it was like this new, I mean, it seems so archaic now, but like for a little kid, that was like, oh, cool. Like I can do this thing that no one could do
Mm-hmm.
before. You have
Mm-hmm.
to go to the library and get a book or something. So, but it's pretty cool. Like it's amazing how much that just blew up all of a sudden. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so, I did the same thing. I did the Atari thing and the thing. I had Atari, my friend had Intellivision.
Is
And
that the one with the little pad on it?
yeah, well, like with numbers and a little
Yeah,
pad.
yeah. My friend had
And
that too.
they had better games than Atari did. I think they had a little more computing power or something. Oh, and you remember Coleco? Do you remember
Yeah,
that one?
ColecoVision. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that's funny that a lot of people may not realize with all this PS5 stuff that's going on this holiday season, where people are like fighting for them and selling them for 2 to 3 times as much money or whatever. And I read an article the other day or this morning about some Walmart employees were busted like buying the whole lot before they went on sale. And that happens all the time. But
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
these people, well, man, they're Walmart workers. If they see an opportunity to make a buck, they're going to take it, dude.
Right,
I know
right.
it's not fair, but hey, they're there. So, but what I'm getting to is I remember back in the early 80s when video games would come out, like the new Atari game or whatever, the same mad dash would happen all the way back then 30 years ago, where like every store around town was sold out, and my mom would be on the phone like calling the Targets, calling the Kmart's or whatever, just trying to find that damn game so I wouldn't be devastated. And it's amazing that they still do that today,
Yeah, yeah.
it seems like it's intentional, creating this artificial demand by underproducing the product and stuff like that. Imagine if Apple, for example, uh, ran out of product every time they did a big release. Like completely ran
They
out.
do, they do. So I mean, it's in the it's in the millions, but it's it gets constrained pretty quick,
Yeah.
and like
Okay.
meaning,
Meaning you have to wait a couple, two, three
yeah,
weeks or
it
whatever.
changes
Okay.
from like
Okay.
1 week to like 4 weeks, but
Okay, yeah,
so I
that's true.
guess in a way
I
that's
guess
good.
it's just not publicized the same way. Maybe they just handle it better, but I don't ever. I guess maybe the only time I ever recall seeing like a mad dash for the iPhone, were like day one when it was released in 2006 or something. That would be kind of be similar to the PS5 thing, and they probably did sell out all in that one day that year. Um, so, but another huge development in our life technology wise was the development of microchip. That's what changed everything. That's what gave us small devices. That's what gave us personal computers. And we were that age where, for me, it was seventh grade, which is 12 years old. 1982 was the first time I ever had a computer class where we were taught to work on computers and taught how to program in BASIC and stuff. And basically had like one of my periods was computers, and I would go work on Apple II pluses and Apple IICs. And like you said, since it's already kind of around, and you're already kind of getting accustomed to computerized devices being around by that point in time, so it wasn't really a big deal. But looking back on it now, you know, say 30, 35 years ago, you know, nobody in the world knew except for the people producing these devices how transformative these devices were going to be. You know, they completely revolutionized the world and how we collect data, how we manage data, and stuff like that. And I just think it's interesting that we were there like day one, like not, you know, I guess the mid '70s was when it all started, but we weren't too far after that. And I think it's a blessing to be a part of this time. And you know, there's people that weren't so fortunate to have a computer course at 12 years old in 1982 like I was, that are my age or a little bit older, that still they're intimidated and can't work on computers today. And it's like they've been left behind. And there's lots of people these days that get an education and they're left behind. And it's just such a competitive disadvantage that I don't know where I'm going with that, but
No, that's a really great point, because so like my experience was this with computers, especially. You know, I look at it now, like my kids grew up, there were already, you know, the kind of iPhone, iPad technology of touchscreens, right? So they don't know a world without that.
mm-hmm,
So, and I guess at the age I was, and I was probably still only five, I think 4 or 5, I was probably 5 or 6. My dad, stepdad, but my dad, he was a doctor. And so he would have computer terminals in his office to just for data, right? Just for collecting, you know, for people's
mm-hmm,
records and stuff like that. He was one of those early people that adopted that. And then when he would upgrade his system, he would bring the old system home so that I could use it. And you know, like it's one of those things that I kick myself sometimes now and think like, God, had I kept going. But like our first computer was called a Tascam 3. You can look it up. It's there. You
mm-hmm,
can see the picture of what it looks like. It's this big gray thing that's got like a little screen on it, and it's DOS. It's not you know, like the apples would run on. But
mm-hmm,
and so he brought it home. He's like, "Hey, come here and check this out." And he gave me this little booklet that just had like DOS code. And like the first one was like a little Star Wars trench run game that you could program. I could program myself. He taught me like the real basics, like,
mm-hmm,
okay,
mm-hmm.
DOS is this. And then you just do one line after another and you just copy what you see. It was like 34 lines of code. And, you know, I mean, there's no way I had any idea why it was the way it was, like
Mm-hmm.
if this, then that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But somehow I did it, and I was able to play this little video game on there that was better graphics. I mean, it was still, you know, the most simplistic graphics you could think of, but it was
Mm-hmm.
like better than Pong, and I had
Mm-hmm.
created it.
Mm-hmm.
But nowhere in my mind was like, I'm hooked, I'm going to keep programming. I was just like, oh, a game, cool. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of hard because I didn't understand it, you know? So I didn't really get the classes there. It was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, hey, figure this out if you want.
Mm-hmm.
But so you're right though, like I was still exposed to it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, where a lot of people don't get the
Well,
exposure,
and
and then
they get this
they're
fear.
at a
It's a
different.
fear of technology, like
Yeah,
the divide in knowledge, to where they're just so intimidated by it, and it just makes them feel stupid, so they won't even try. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. I mean, that's you know, totally true. And like as you know, the '80s went on, the obviously the systems got a little better because I think he upgraded every couple years. So I was, you know, I mean, it was, you know, the one I remember really well that first had internet on it was it was like 375K of memory, you know,
Mm-hmm.
which is not, I mean, that's not even a megabyte, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And yet with that, I could do a lot. I could get online, and he taught me how to turn the internet on, and it had the old internet sound. And that's like that first um, foray into online world, where everybody at that time, it was all just chat rooms. It was like AOL chat rooms and shit like that. And everybody was pretending to be somebody else. I mean, it was bizarre. And I guess at that point I was 11 or 12, so I wasn't too young, but I was young enough to do stupid shit. And like, yeah, but it was just crazy. Like, I had that ability to figure that out, and it wasn't intimidating at all for me. But to your point, it's become so scary for some people, and especially now. Like, imagine if you're one of those people now that just isn't exposed, and how vast what you can do is. Like, you can get really intimidated and not do anything, or you can get sucked into one part of it and really go down a rabbit hole, because it's like the one part you figured out, like a chat room, or like I don't know, anything, online porn, or negative shit. You can get sucked into something. So yeah, it's really interesting, and there's not really a lot that they teach in schools. I didn't remember anything in school or high school that was specifically like, okay, here's computer class, here's how you use it, here's how you don't use it, here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do, here's how you protect yourself. None of that happened. Everybody was, I still think in high school, for me, most people didn't really have internet. It wasn't
So
really
there was no internet when I was in high school, or at least not like on a household basis or anything.
yeah. So we had that. We had some internet, and it was all like text screen and maybe a few pictures here and there that took 20 minutes to load a picture. But like I said, mostly it was chat rooms, and those worked just fine. So you could go into
Well,
all
are
these
you
people's
talking
chat
about
rooms.
are these computers with phone modems
Yeah.
or okay?
Phone modems.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
he used it at home to get into his office computer, so he could do his work on his files at home. But obviously you get AOL, and then it came on a disk, and then you get to use AOL. So I mean, yeah, for a kid, I was just exposed to that.
well, the phone modems I'm talking about is where you take the actual earpiece of the phone and you put it in two cups, and then there are two receiving cups that'll receive the headset. And
Ours was just a little bit more advanced, in that it was just not coax, whatever, the one that goes over the phone.
the Cat 5, yeah,
So it was
that
like
came
an
a
extra
little
Cat 5.
that came a little bit later. There's a couple things I did. Before we get full on into the internet and past that, do you remember what a Commodore 64 was?
Yep. My friend
So
Ben had one.
we had one of
Hmm.
those in our household, and a lot of the data or games or anything on that device were stored on cassette tapes. And you would hook a cassette tape up to the computer and play it, and it would basically download the data from the cassette tape to the computer in a similar way that a floppy disk would, or these days a CD drive would.
Yeah.
And it would take forever, dude. It would take forever. And so that was a lot of fun. But there's this one other thing I wanted to do that was like really archaic computing. Sometime in the 70s or 80s, there was this game that everybody was fixated on called Adventure. And you'd bring home this computer that did not have a CRT. All it could do was print words, almost like it's a little bit more than a typewriter, because it has that phone headset receptacle to plug the phone into the computer, and then you dial a number, and then it sends all these sounds to the computer, and then all of a sudden you log in, and like you're basically probably on my mom's system at work, and there's this game called Adventure. And what you would do is you basically, through the text, it would describe a room,
Yeah.
and then you'd map this place out, and you'd find treasures, and it was really creative and imaginative, but it was all text. But you could go into this world like almost like in a Dungeons and Dragon type way. And boy, I was so addicted to that game, dude. I love playing that game. I played that game for hours and hours and hours. days and days and days, and I basically all but forgot about it until just now in this conversation.
I vaguely remember that because we in our school we did have the Apple IIs,
Uh-huh.
and we had the one where it was like where you were traveling west to like Oregon to Oregon Trail. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you remember that at all, but it was a text type game where it was like, you have like this many arrows and you have run into a herd of buffalo and you have to
Mm-hmm.
kill buffalo to eat them. And then, some people starve and all you're trying to do is make it from wherever in the Midwest to Oregon so that you can survive, and like move west. And it was a text based game. But they had like one little digital, animation where it was just like a little, covered wagon going doot, 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 like
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's how you knew where you were on the map or whatever. But similar to that. But yeah, really, really interesting because those were like super fun games as a
They
kid. Like
sure were,
you had to
dude.
use your brain, you had to like kind of solve those puzzles to keep going. And I mean, it's crazy that
I mean,
like
you
that's
had to
what we
use
had.
and you had to use your imagination. Like I think our imaginations were much more vivid back then because you could literally see these worlds and map them out in your head when it's really just like black and white print on a piece of paper. So that was a lot of fun. I'm gonna
Yeah, and I
take us.
used to. Sorry, I just wanted to say one thing because like in grade school, at that time when we were doing that, like fourth, fifth, sixth grade, I used to daydream. I remember daydreaming specifically like one day about like, man, it'd be cool to have a game where it was really realistic and you could drive around in a car in your own city and like drive by your house and your friends' houses and see what that, and just like do fun stuff like adventure. And, obviously that has happened, maybe not
Mm-hmm.
that exact thing, but that kind of computing power. So it's just weird, like what it can do to your mind of a kid, your imagination starts to go wild. Like, ooh, what'll this be like in the
Mm-hmm.
future, So it's
Well,
pretty cool.
you go back to like the Atari games, and I mean, they're pretty, like you said, they're pixelated, and it's almost like they're two dimensional. They're not even three
Yeah, they're
dimensional. They're
totally
just
two dimensional.
these little figures on the screen, like,
Yeah.
and you're playing that, and even like, as an 8 to 10 year old, I don't remember how old I was, maybe 10 to 12. You're just thinking, I can't wait till this gets better.
Yeah.
You know that it's gonna get more lifelike to the point, now we have virtual reality, and there's gonna become a time where reality and VR, whatever, is indistinguishable. And we were at the start of that, and I just think I'm glad we're there, dude. I waited for this my whole life, to be honest with you.
Well, it's funny because that was what I thought of the Commodore 64 games was that was the better
Mm-hmm.
graphics game. Like Ben, Ben had that game or had that
Mm-hmm.
computer. We used to play the Olympics one, and you
Mm-hmm.
could do the little ski jump and do little flips and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and the Ghostbusters game, and it was just like this is bad. We used to play that for hours at his house. We'd go
Mm-hmm.
over there after school and play that until 8 o'clock, and it was like, okay, you have to go home now, or I'd sleep
Mm-hmm.
over on the weekends or whatever. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, so it was awesome, and yeah, to see where it's going now, and how it's I mean, I just say this kind of little side note, but there's that theory in physics that we might be living in a simulation, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just so good. There's no way to tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And now we can see that path that it's not impossible to think
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
even 50, 100 years from now, it could be that good, so
Yeah. Yeah,
which is scary too.
I'm really completely fascinated and curious about that simulation idea. It's talked about a lot on YouTube and stuff. And some of these people say it's a 50-50 chance that we're living in a simulation or not. Just real quick, the one thing I want to touch on is back in 2000 when I saw The Matrix, which is basically like the same idea. I just had such a this is real deja vu type feeling. They nailed that story.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe they were trying to tell us something with that movie, dude.
I've heard that a lot, and I felt the same way. It was one of those, and I think it's like, obviously a testament to why it was so popular.
Mm-hmm.
Is I think it tapped into something that we all maybe subconsciously feel like
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
real or is a thing, and so I think it was a real eye opener, and the way that they did it was really great too because it had the story kind of drug you in of like, what would you do if you found this out? Would you want to continue with the ignorance is bliss, or would you
Mm-hmm.
want to know that you're really in a nightmare scenario where you don't control yourself at all? You're not
Yeah,
in control.
yeah. I love the way they frame that philosophical question. So, what do you think about? I mean, obviously, this isn't a comprehensive analysis of technology. It's just two dudes talking about technology and kind of how it touched their life and what they remember, what they think by it. I think the next kind of step in both our lives would be when internet got quicker, because basically everybody had internet that didn't work. We had
Mhm.
we called it dial up, and
Yeah.
like you'd plug your phone in, you get to the web page, you download the web page, then you'd go run and do all these chores around your house, and you'd come back and see if the page had come down yet. Do you remember that shit?
Yes. Hell yeah. Of
Okay,
course.
so that's basically just internet that doesn't even fucking work. We have it, but boy, you got to really stumble your way through that and
Yeah. Right. Right.
just have an immense amount of patience, because it's just hurry up and wait, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we had, and uh, oh, so let me just tell this other story. So I had all this computer experience, which I thought was a lot, and then I went to university in '88. And when I started using computers there, they were using the early IBMs, which they called the 8088 machines, and those were just DOS based. And so you had to learn how to code in DOS and stuff. And it was just real clunky. We couldn't really get it to do a whole lot. And then, probably a couple years later, around '92, the whole the whole computer lab at the University of Texas was outfitted with Macintoshes.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I did not know how to do that at all. I remember I was just so embarrassed and so intimidated. And this is somebody that comes from computers. It was just the mouse was such a huge jump, dude, to go from just a keyboard to a keyboard and mouse. And so I was so inept with that mouse that just picture me on ice as somebody that doesn't know how to ice skate. That's what it was like for me, man. The cursor was just all over the damn screen. I couldn't get it to stop and be at the right place. It was just like I was all thumbs, dude, and I was a spaz. And so I had to get another nice student at the computer lab next to me to kind of show me how to do this damn mouse thing, dude. And that's no lie, dude. It seems like what I just told you wouldn't be true, especially with what you know about me and knowing me, but that's a fact. And I just want to share it with you and share it with, anybody else who's listening.
It's super interesting because I think for me, like I graduated in high school in '92, and the only computing I was doing then was at my house, which was again just online chat rooms and blah blah blah. And I had some computer games I liked a lot of different kind of like flight simulator type computer games and stuff like that. So when I graduated in '92, that's when I kind of started traveling and I was playing music. I don't think I did any computing from '92 to um, '97.
Mm-hmm.
So a good 5 years of never really touching a computer. And so when I went back to it then, which was when I went back to like a community college to get some degree, what do you call them? Some credits before I went to a regular school. That's the first time. And I got like at that point, for where I was from, Gateway was like the big company.
Oh, I remember that.
So got a Gateway, and it wasn't anything special, but still it was starting to get better. Then it was like starting to get better, where I really noticed a big shift from where I was from the AOL disk and all that crap we had to pay for access to basically just like an open source, internet. And the web pages were better, it loaded faster. It was still kind of picture based. It wasn't a lot of video stuff yet, but yeah, it was like a big change. And still, that was, I mean, I guess you'd say that's DOS based, but it had a mouse. So
Well,
I got used to that.
it might have been it was Windows by that
Well,
time.
Windows based. That's right.
Yeah.
But Windows was based off of.
So I want to share a parallel story with you about that same time period. I dropped out of university in '93 with only about 5 credits to go, just because I wanted to take some time off and play in bands and stuff and travel. And I wanted to do it at that age.
Yeah.
So I just did it. And then I basically did the band thing and traveled for about 4 years. You know, did the Grateful Dead thing, played in bands with you and other people. And then right at the end of this would be December 97 is when I got my degree. So my point is how quickly things change in just like 4 or 5 years. I went from being a DOS-based IBM guy to piddling around a little bit with Macintosh. When I went back to school, the class that I needed to take was a computer class in geography. It was a geographic information systems. We had to do maps and map layers and all this shit. In order to be allowed to take that class, we had to pass a Windows dexterity test before he'd accept us to the class. I failed.
Test. Oh,
I
really?
failed. I'd never
Wow.
been on Windows in my life because, to your point, I did not compute from 93 to 97. So it's like I came back. It's like, you know, waking up 20 years later to a different world.
Yeah.
That's what Windows like to me. And so I failed. He was like, and it was shit like drag this here, put this folder here, rename this folder. I didn't know what the fuck any of that was, dude. Like this folder-based directory system and drag and drop and copy and paste.
Well.
He wanted you to know these basic skills. So I just failed. And obviously he gives you some direction to learn how to do it and come back and retake the test and take the class. So I went to the computer lab and basically just studied up on that shit and went through that list and learned how to do every one of those goddamn things. I don't know why I'm cussing so much today, but every one of those tasks, to the point where, and this is where my whole computer knowledge comes from to this day and why I'm actually pretty good at it, from that one Windows fail. Okay. So I learned Windows. I got to take that class. And when I'm on that class, it's a cutting edge computer lab at the University of Texas that's wired with fast fiber. And this professor brought this to UT. He was a computer guy too, like leading the nation. So I got to work on world-class computers with world-class instruction. He was teaching us how to do web pages. He was thinking us how to problem solve, even so much as like to search the internet with different keywords. He would show us how sometimes if you rephrase something, you can get better results, or like if you don't get good results, you got to tell the computer what it wants to hear. And so I went from that. That basically put me as a you know, a top line computer user. And then just a couple years after that was when internet got faster. So I was a super early adopter of internet. I had my own computer. And in 2000, I was running my first online business. I made a web page. I had a cart. I was going to Chinese websites and buying this product, having it delivered to my home, shipping it out all over the whole world 20 years ago, dude. And that was all. It's not really about me. It's just about my experience. This is all because I was computer savvy.
Right.
And
well,
this is back to that point of just what a hindrance it is for people who don't feel confident on the computer. And I'm going to digress here for just a second. I've been real dissatisfied with all this sitting around that I've been doing during COVID. And, you know, a lot of people suggest volunteering, and it's like I'm very picky about my volunteer gigs. One thing I've decided to do is basically volunteer teaching people internet skills and stuff and get them up to speed where they can unlock the world and answer any questions they need answered, teach themselves any skill they want to teach themselves. Because a lot of people don't know you can do that. And, you know, we talked about education the other day in that text. This is something I can do that I'm very good at, and I can just open the whole world to these people and empower them so they can empower themselves. And that's what I'm going to do as a volunteer gig, like muy pronto.
I think that's really that's a wonderful idea, wonderful thing
Yeah,
to offer.
and I can do
because
it so
really, it sounds like for you, it was legitimately like the two times, there was two times in your stories today where you said, I asked for help.
Uh-huh.
And the first was in that computer lab. And the second was this guy who, I mean, you didn't ask, but you failed the test and he offered some help.
Oh yeah.
So you asked for help and then you got help.
And what if I didn't have access to that knowledge? I could still be stuck way behind, dude.
Yeah.
You know?
And so like, and I could just tell like it probably what he told you to do after failing that thing something clicked in you where you're like, oh, I get it now. Probably
Well,
this is something that's what it did for me.
there's several things that clicked. One, I felt confident instead of scared, but two, I learned that I can learn. I learned that I can teach myself and get over shit that I don't know. Just because a lot of people think, oh, well, I don't know that. Well, you can know that, and you could go look into it and find out what all this stuff is and find out the answer for it and become educated and knowledgeable. And that's what computers do.
Yeah. Do you want to know? That's the question.
Well, I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people give up because they don't like feeling stupid. Think about that.
Well, I kind of joke because it is sort of like that a priori story about the knowledge of good and evil, because when you get hooked into it, there's a lot of good out there, but there's also a lot of fucked up shit online,
So we've talked about computers and computers and computers, and obviously that is the story of our lifetime, the digital age and the information age. But knowing both of our backgrounds, I think it might be nice to shift gears right now into to music and music technology and how that's kind of evolved from our teenage years to now. Whether it's drum machines or synthesizers or digital production or even guitar pedals or new boutique amps or whatever, we could probably talk about that for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, the first real experience with any kind of technology music-wise was just the instrument itself, which has been around.
An electric guitar.
Electric guitar, and then
amplifier,
and then figuring out how you could make it louder, this louder. What do these knobs do? What the hell is middle? I don't know what that is.
Or what the hell is reverb? I never heard of reverb in my life.
Yeah. Right.
Vibrato.
I guess I knew. Once I figured that out, I was like, oh, that's what reverb is. That's what I'm hearing. It's just an echo. Right. And then the first experience recording was a four track Tascam 4-track that Ben had, and that was just like a major fucking process to set that up and bounce it out. And I give him credit, man. He went through those tiny manuals where like most of it was in Chinese, like literally. And like there was like one small section that gives you the basics in English, and he had to figure it all out. And, I mean, you can't do much. It's like you have a regular tape that you have to, it's not like a nice, reel to reel audio tape. It's like a tape. And, it's like you had a few chances to get it right. And then it would start to get that bleed in where you could hear the previous things that you'd recorded and then recorded it over. So that was, we did some stuff with that. It worked out okay. And then it was, again, like there was that long period when I didn't do anything. And when I went back to it, it was like GarageBand in like 2006. And so that's a long time. So even after I'd gotten back into computing, there were some programs for Windows that were okay, but they were kind of shit, really.
They were very technical and difficult to use.
And they weren't, not friendly to use at all. And then in 2006, I got my first Mac, or shortly after I got into Macs. And that's when it was like the whole world opened up of like what you can do on your own, So, I mean, so technology wise, as far as recording, that's how that kind of goes now, where I have a, MacBook Pro now, and I have Logic on it and I can understand it and I can turn it on and get working on it and do so much shit. And just, I mean, this is one of those things that I say about say Logic or any DAW, music DAW. And I said it about YouTube many years ago to you. It's like, there's so much you can do. I don't even know where to start. That's like how much is available now. Is like, I don't even know where to start. It's like, you think about what you want to do and you're like, well, shit, I can do that like 5,000 different ways. But anyways, like that's sort of been my, progression as far as music stuff. I still keep the instruments really pretty simple. I don't have a lot of pedals. I have like one distortion pedal, and a tuner, and that's it. So, I mean, I don't really go much farther than that, but it's the technology with music for me is more recording.
Sure. Well, just for instance, me, like, my very first guitar was an electric guitar that didn't work, but it was a semi-hollow body, so I basically played it as an acoustic guitar. And so that's all I never, for all my first years of playing music, I never had an amplifier, dude. I was just playing an electric guitar. That's why I'm not good at soloing or anything, is I just never had a fucking amp to learn how to like use that electricity. And uh and then so then I guess to my parents, once it seems like I'm really gonna continue to play music, I talked my dad into buying me a guitar for my birthday, and you know this story. And but that's he's not going to spend. He's only going to spend a certain amount of money on the guitar, and it's I'm going to make payments to him to pay the rest of it off. And I missed my first fucking payment. I never made a fucking payment. So, but I didn't have an amp, dude. I just had a Telecaster, and then so he takes my guitar away, and then I don't have a guitar anymore. And then this is going somewhere. Then I get the guitar back for Christmas, but I still don't have an amp. This is probably around 88. And I moved to Austin and get my first financial aid check. And I go out and buy an amp at the pawn shop, like first fucking thing.
Like many others have done.
And it's the very fucking first time I had electric guitar. So for me, that was a technology jump kind of from acoustic guitar to electric guitar, even though that's kind of real tiny and subtle. I always liked pedals. I definitely appreciated, the technology that they were. I think, in all honesty, the reason I didn't use pedals a lot is because I just wasn't very good at using them. Like, having like a song have different parts, and you turn this pedal on for this phrase, and then you turn this pedal on for this. I wasn't very good at choreographing shit like that. Like you watch the professionals today, and they have a rig board of about 20 fucking pedals. Yeah, right. And
that's hooked into like a little,
and it's fully choreographed. They can just hit the right one at the right time. And it's like, I never was that good at that, so, and also I just thought I could get by without it. Today there are a lot of guitar players that play with a clean tone. I think there's probably more that play with, 30 boxes. Recording. I basically was running a recording program on my computer probably as far back as 2000. There was a program called Samplitude, and it was just really hard to use, dude. It was so complicated, and I think you'll agree with this point. I wanted to be recording music, not studying how to fucking use this software.
Yeah, right.
Or like what you said about Ben and the fucking manuals on the 4-track. I don't want to read tiny manuals for hours on end and try to put this together. I just want to press record.
Well, it kills the freaking vibe, man.
It does, dude.
It kills it quicker.
Yeah, you're just sitting around. You want to play, and I know how rabid you are about playing, and how you were. It's like just the biggest buzzkill to just be salivating at the bit, wanting to play guitar, and then all of a sudden it's like 3 hours later, and you haven't done a damn thing, right?
And the thing is you have to do it every time to get that shit to work.
Oh, and like you get the producer over, and like they have everything set up, and then they go and they're like, "Why won't this work?"
Oh yeah,
I tested everything and it was working. Right. Why won't this work? And they have to tear the whole damn thing apart, just trying to figure out where the problem was. And you're just standing there like, it's like so infuriating. So take us to GarageBand from that point, which I got my first Mac in 2006. I basically got tired of my Windows machines freezing all the time, and so I just had enough, switched to Mac, and never looked back. My Macs have never froze, with the proverbial blue screen of death the way my Windows machines did. So that was my first experience with GarageBand as well, and it's just so intuitive, man. It's like it's a screen that's easy to read. Like it's like there's one big record button. It's just like, and that was the first time we kind of got to drag and drop our music, and the tape doesn't degrade. You're not limited by only 4 tracks. There's infinite effects you could put on top of it, where before these effects would have to be like guitar effects and shit run through the system and everything.
Yeah.
And so that was just such a huge leap forward in technology and creativity, to the point where for the first time in our life, we could produce our own songs, which we've done several, and without a whole lot of technical knowledge. We kind of just learned how to do it on the fly, and that was a I don't know, man. That's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, technology-wise. Period. Is just getting to record music on a computer, and that's disregarding whether tape or computers are better. They both are better at some things. Damn, I'm not talking into my mic tonight.
Oh, I can hear you fine.
But again, it's that great equalizer, just like the internet was, where the small guy can produce his songs and albums and stuff in his room and release them to the world without having huge technical knowledge or tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. And I think it's kind of revolutionized the music scene and listening and everything. And I've been always felt really fortunate to be a part of this time because of the digital revolution in music.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before too. It makes it so everybody can get their stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the cream will still always rise to the top,
mm-hmm.
but sometimes it's harder to slog through, right? So I mean, which is fine, and I think maybe that's just like how we evolve as humans, as we learn to deal with more input now. Like that's like the next evolutionary stage is how do we take more input in and make a decision quicker or something. I don't know, but because again, like everyone can record now, and so everyone does, and you start to hear like the homogenization of certain things, but then
mm-hmm.
and then this new thing will come, and it'll be like completely new and different, and how amazing like that Mark Rebelay stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a huge shift that I saw happening.
Mm-hmm.
That I was just like, oh, what an odd thing, like funny, it was like funny. But then it was like, wow, he's really doing something with just him and a couple, like a little cheap
mm-hmm.
M audio keyboard and a Mac and, some main stage or whatever. But yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I think it, I still wonder to this day, like, why is this so intuitive? Like, I don't even understand why it's intuitive. Like, why do I understand what I'm looking at? Even though I don't really have, I mean, you can do like quick, basic, how to set up like a track, right? And that takes like
mm-hmm.
2 or 3 minutes versus 2 or 3 hours. And maybe that's what it is.
Well,
once you do that once,
it's really good design. I mean, you know what intuitive means? It means like, what to do next. You know where to start. You know where the record button is. You know how to get this from there. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but to make something intuitive, it's just really good design, and that's what Apple's been so good at for so long, is how to make things intuitive, and that kind of touches on the whole thing we've been talking about the whole day. Initially, technology wasn't intuitive at all. Digital technology, computers, the quote unquote UI, the user interface, was clunky and cumbersome, and it's hard to figure out.
Except for ultra nerdy computer programmers.
Yeah.
That's who it was built for, right? So, interestingly enough, I don't mean to interrupt you. I don't know if you had more on that.
No, not necessarily.
Because there is like a really cool, and I don't remember what year it is. It's like 83, 84 maybe, or maybe a little bit after that. Like just a quick 20, 30 minute Steve Jobs interview. Or no, he's like talking to like a group of people in like Switzerland about computing and the future of computing. And he was one of those really first people to talk about it being used in somebody's house and being able to be understood and take it out of that, like you have to get like this degree and you have to really just spend hours on it to get it to where people can do their own blog and they can do their own podcast, and it's simple and it's easy to use and it's ubiquitous. And it's just, it makes me wonder, like I wondered back when I was a kid, like, oh, it'll be cool someday if this is all like kind of really real and you can get in these video games and look around, and I'm like, well, what is it going to be like what's next?
Well, this
like,
is
the next intuitive thing.
If you don't mind, I'm not going to worry about the hour today. There's, we may go over by a couple minutes. There's a few more things I want to talk about, and basically that's the future. Okay. Nobody could have predicted where we are today, and I'm not saying we can't predict the future. from say 1980 to 2020, that's 40 years. Through the media these days and just being such a voracious reader, I see a lot of people that are touching on like the coming technology, what's in the works right now. And there's two things that I am really intrigued by, and you probably know a little bit about both of these, and maybe you can add your thoughts to them. One is the Neuralink, and number two, Neuralink is an example of this, basically wearable technology. And I'm not talking about Google Glass. I'm talking about in the brain, and where you compute just by thinking. Basically, we have an onboard computer, and we don't have to touch. People are going to look back and laugh at touch screens, and just like we did on keyboards. Okay, and so this is the idea of even more intuitive computing, and to where basically we'll just look at something or think a thought, and that will be like hitting return or clicking the mouse. Okay. I think that's coming very, very, very quick. And then the whole idea of a Neuralink, basically adding a computer to your brain that kind of makes you superhuman, makes you way quicker than you would be without it, and gives you talents that would be humanly impossible without the Neuralink, right? Okay. And one more thing before I let you talk is, unfortunately, there is a digital divide, and there's also a class divide in this world. So some people, a very small minority of people, are going to have access to this best of best technology, and most of the world is not going to have access to this technology, and therefore they're going to be able to outcompete them at every turn, which basically means that they're going to make more and more and more and more and more money and just be better at everything. So anyways, I'll leave you with that, and you can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's like, first off, with the Neuralink, just to add to all the things you said, it's this, this idea that you would be jacked in, and everything that you think and all the other people that are jacked in think are all known to you at the same time. That is sort of future predictive programming, right? Because then you know what's going to happen because everybody's thinking at the same time, and it's like you can determine. And dude, we can't even get people to take a vaccine without them thinking there's a fucking computer chip in it. Could you imagine trying to get them to get a surgery to put a chip in their brain? That's going to be like, so to your point, the billionaire class of the world are all about this shit. Most of them are all about it. So they're not scared of it because they're like, this is just going to be another advantage. Some of them have talked about, the scary nature of like, what does that mean? Who controls it? What happens if it goes down? What are the implications of this actually being something? But, like I look at that stuff and I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to do that. Like, I get it. Like I'd be left behind, but man, like, what does that mean? It's like, do we all become one thing? Do we all become like a hive mind, or is there any individuality left in that? That's the scary part that's scary. It's the perplexing part, or the part I think about most is like, do we lose everything that we are as humans and just become like a beehive where we just make actions and do things and you know what? We could probably do that, and we could probably exceed any expectation anybody would ever have of what kind of like, steps and leaps and bounds we could make in technology and science and everything. And, we've never done a podcast about like possible alien cultures and things, but some people theorize that those kind of cultures that do have that hive mind thing come here to try and get and this just sounds so fucking bizarre, but it's like, they come here to get, like biological materials so they can try and get back to where people were less of a hive mind kind of thing. I don't know. All I'm saying is there's a lot of shit to think about where it's like, it's going to happen faster than I think we're going to be ready for it to happen.
Very much like a science fiction movie, And this kind of leads to like another idea, like, does technology actually move us forward, which is kind of the way the story goes. We're constantly moving forward, and look how great things are today with all this great technology compared to times in the past when, you know, everything was so much harder. But to your point, you lose something. And is that something people are willing to lose? Or if when we lose it, will we lose it forever and wish we had it back?
Yeah. Can you unplug yourself if you're like, I don't like this? Or is it like, no, you're part of this now,
Well,
buddy?
another thing that's really interesting to me about it is I do think there's a lot of people that are just so curious and hobbyists like with technology that they just want to, they're just like, well, I wonder if we can do this or what can we do next? And they're just inventing and curious just for the sake of, you know, the creative mind.
Yeah.
And I think there's other people that take this technology and use it for not the best uses, or at least not the best uses for everybody. And it's just really weird, you know, like, is technology, I mean, I don't know how to answer this. You just have to wonder. Oh no, here's what I would say. It's not the people of the earth that are even driving technology. Like, probably like 80% of the world would never have even craved this technology that the drivers of technology are driving and kind of presenting us with and foisting on us, to where you have to do this now. You know, you have to be able to
Yeah.
code. You have to be able to type.
If you want to
Yeah, and this
succeed.
is it.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say to you is, it's not. I don't think it's anything anybody ever craved, dude. You know, I don't know if I'm wrong about that.
No, I think you're right. Well, this was the whole thing with just going back to Apple was we want to give them what they don't know they need yet. They
Mm-hmm.
don't know that they need this stuff, but we're going to give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be the same thing with this stuff, whether you're talking Elon Musk or
Mm-hmm.
whoever. Um, you know, the one thing that I've heard said before that to me still gives me pause and makes me wonder is the technology that we are creating and those people are creating is way beyond what I think we are as a species can handle. Now,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean it shouldn't be created? No, but I'm just saying you got to be really careful because, you know, we think because we've created this technology that we can handle it and that we're smart. Now we think we're smart, but dude, we still kill each other, you know, in wars and all this other crap on a regular basis. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
we have elevated ourselves to a point where we're like, okay, we are ready to move forward now. It's just it's going to happen in this void of or not in a void. It's going to happen in this big soup of shit going on that tells me that we're still barbaric type creatures. We're
Mm-hmm.
still all focused on war and making money and like, you know, stepping on the other person to get what you want. There's no way that some motherfucker isn't going to use that against us, you know, and use that technology and go, I got them now.
Yeah.
And so this is the danger, I think. And it doesn't mean because technology itself is just like a car, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like a car is a car. It doesn't do
Mm-hmm.
anything until you get in and use it.
Mm-hmm.
And it can run people over, but it can also get you from point A to point B
Mm-hmm.
without ever
Mm-hmm.
hurting anybody. How do you use it? So how is that going to be managed? I don't know because it's them that are creating it that are going to use it. They're the ones that are going to manage it for themselves because they have all the
Mm-hmm.
money and power
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
Absolutely. Well, one thing that kind of kept popping in my mind as you were talking was what a Pandora's box technology is. You know, like just the most literal version of a Pandora's box. You know, meaning once you plug it in or open the lid to the box, you can't put the stuff back inside the box.
Yeah,
And that kind of speaks to what you said about, you know, what do we gain and what do we lose? I mean, obviously, so a lot of this stuff makes our life easier and makes a lot of things more convenient. But were we all sitting around thinking about how bad things were before we had this shit? No, it
no,
was just fucking normal. You know what? We talked to each other a whole lot more back
yeah.
then.
Well, you only knew who your direct community. Now we know everybody's problems,
Well, there's
and now
just
we
really,
make everybody's
but
problems our problems.
there's really something to be said about, you know, the face to face version of communication, because that's when people are accommodating and listening, and you really get to know somebody by, the way they hold themselves. And there's a whole other thing we're talking about, but that's lost in, cyber communication. And I think it's why people are so divided and poor at communicating with each other and understanding each other. It's once again because of technology. I would argue that point strongly.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. It's probably one of the biggest reasons we're divided as much as we are now, is it's easy to tell somebody you're a piece of shit dumbass online.
Yeah,
and you don't have to deal with any consequences.
And I think I talked about this in another podcast. It's real easy to spew that stuff online, but when we're outside, if somebody drops a quarter, you pick it up and hand it to them. Or, if somebody's behind, you hold the door open for them. Or, you arrive at the register at the same time as somebody, you're like, no, after you. That's the way people are, really. I just really believe it. But for some reason, people are both ways, but there's something inside human beings. It's light and dark, dude, to where given the opportunity to do something to kind of feed that dark side without consequences, you're going to do it.
So yeah. And to your point, I mean, I think it's really important. Most people would do those appropriate, nice things and, help people out. But what this stuff does and what we're seeing now is it gets them. I mean, you could say the word radicalizes them. It does that enough to where their mind now is set on, okay, I need to hurt this group of people. Mm-hmm. And it leaves the bedroom, or it leaves the basement, and it becomes acted out in public. Like these, like whatever protests, you could say Proud Boys, BLM, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But that's taking that shit to another level, right? And fortunately right now, we could say it's a small number of people that are willing to go out and actually get physical and violent. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that if it's not pushed and pushed and pushed, that it couldn't get worse. So I'm not for censorship or for, controlling how things are or what they are online or whatever, but it takes a large amount of education to get people to handle some of this shit, mm-hmm. And not take it personally and not go, well, how dare you tell me I'm going to get you kind of thing, which is, I think, maybe another topic for another podcast, but.
Indeed. Okay. I feel good about, where we've gone today. I think we could pretty much wrap it up. And it's funny that you said education, because that's going to be a future topic of ours, maybe our absolute next one, because that's so I think that's a good place to stop today.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate your patronage. Again, we're Pie the Corner. You can find us on all of the podcasting platforms, and also on YouTube. So thank you again for your time, and have a wonderful evening.
Guys, please go ahead and subscribe and/or follow us. It really helps us with the algorithms and whatever. We're trying to build this thing. All right. Over and out. Thanks.